Hey, warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. We're going to chat with him about what we've all been seeing in the offseason, the struggle for these teams to find good balance in terms of some of these teams that have not utilized the transfer portal whatsoever, and teams that maybe went a little bit too far into the transfer portal, and just the way that they're trying to find their blend, the way that some of these teams have really rearranged their thought process in the offseason, like Marquette, who's finally utilizing the transfer portal. We're going to highlight the good off seasons that we've seen thus far from the bottom Big 12 teams from this past season, along with the Big East as a whole, and we're going to also chat with them about some of the big teams like Kansas and Kentucky that have yet to do a ton in the transfer portal. Then in the final segment, I'm going to give you guys a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball on Monday. If you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, RCM naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And while I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, we are seeing the transfer portal closing here Tuesday night, and that has led to this. And I do think that this is worth talking about here. We're seeing guys that are just completely out of eligibility, hoping and praying for another year of eligibility. This was tweeted out by Jeff Borzello on Monday that we've seen the likes of Justin Abson, Kadir Copeland, Jaden Pierre, that they have completely run out of eligibility, that they're hoping that the 5-for-5 rule happens. That means that you have 5 years of play in 5 years in general. That starts with like age 19, and that the clock starts up there, and they're just hoping and praying for another year of eligibility because these are guys that they entered into the college process after COVID, but they have only gotten 4 years of eligibility, so that's what they're hoping and praying for, that this 5-and-5 rule sort of goes through. And if it does, it could lead to, shall we say, a second turn in the transfer portal. Like someone like a Tyler Nickel, for example, probably not going to be getting signed here in the next few days. But if this ruling does go through, there's probably going to be a lot of teams that are going to be like, hey, Tyler Nickel, we are very interested in this guy who he played for 4 years over at UNC, Virginia Tech. This last year at Vanderbilt, 13.5 points, shot 40% from 3 for a legitimate top 20 team in all of college basketball. Where do we sign up for that? So it is going to be really interesting to take a look at that. So we could see a second turnaround in the transfer portal. Now, if this does not go through and these guys do not get eligibility, obviously they just entered in the transfer portal for no reason whatsoever. But that said, it's going to be very interesting to see what is going to be happening with that regard. And I do think that that's worth talking about a little bit. So we're going to be seeing that in the coming days, coming weeks. And as we know, it goes through jurisdiction, what have you. But it does feel like there's a little bit of momentum for the 5-and-5 rule to be able to go through. So if that does indeed become the case, there could be some guys that hit the open market that are going to make things very interesting for these teams like Kansas, like Kentucky, like LSU, that have not necessarily signed a lot of players just yet, and maybe they get them a little bit more on the cheap. So hopefully we are going to be seeing a little bit more on that here in the coming days and coming weeks, and could lead to some more hoopla here in the offseason. And things are always rambunctious and fun when this man is aboard. Ryan McIntyre does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. He joins me next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is vsin.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Ryan McIntyre aboard. He does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball all 12 months out of the year. He and Kobe Dan do an excellent job with the show, The College Experience, and they're not just looking at college basketball, they're looking forward to what's going to be a great college football season. I know that they're doing a great job on the college baseball scene right now and so much more. You're able to follow them on the old Twitter/X at Moneyline_Mac, spelled M-A-C. And Ryan, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Greg, always appreciate you having me on. Unfortunately, we don't have games anytime soon.
Yeah, it's going to be a while. We're going to be waiting over 180 days, but at the very least, we do have mayhem, and that is happening in the transfer portal. And just what have you made out of the first 2 weeks of the transfer portal? Because I believe that's going to be closing in about 24 to 48 hours, and as we sit here right now, we've got 2,441 players in the portal.
Is that what the number is? Yeah, it never amazes me anymore now that we've done this a couple years. So interested to see where a lot of these guys land. I think a lot of guys are asking for way more money than they probably earn, but seems that the market reflects that they may get that. So interested to see how things shake out. We've seen teams really go all in, like Indiana, and we'll see if it's able to work out because, yes, you can buy a team, but culture continuity still do matter in this day and age.
Absolutely. I am right there with you. And we've seen some teams that traditionally don't go into the transfer portal actually do so. And by that, I mean Marquette signed another player in the transfer portal. I think they've signed 2 more players than they did in the last 5 years combined, with bringing in Noah Minsale. He was over at St. Thomas last year. Just how much do you think that it's a sign of the times when a school like Marquette is signing players out of the portal, because they were avoiding it like the plague for oh so long, and it feels like they just begrudgingly gave in this offseason?
Yeah, I think a down year may change your mind on how you view things. So Shaka, definitely not a fan of the portal. I don't blame him. I'm not the biggest fan of just the craziness that it is every single offseason, but sometimes you have to adapt or perish, and Shaka is leaning in more to the portal now, so we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, absolutely. And how much do you think that a lot of teams are looking a little bit more of a hybrid approach? Because I feel like Michigan might have been the most portal-heavy team that won the title in this day and age, but we noticed the last few years it's a lot of teams that they pick up like that number 3 scorer that pushes them over the top. They maintain a lot of their guys, but they need to add someone, and I think that that has been the blueprint for success, much like a team that I know that you've brought up quite a bit the last few months, a UConn.
I think you and I definitely have agreed on this for a couple of years now, just doing this show weekly, that yes, you can go into the portal, you can get as many guys as you want, but I think the way to get things done and have the best chance to win consistently year after year is bring back guys for a second, third year in that system, and then add a guy or two via the transfer portal as a need, like we see at the professional level. I think that's the best formula if you're able to pull it off.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I think that you need to be signing more than 0 guys like Marquette was the last 2 seasons, but also when you're bringing in, like we saw with Kansas State for Jerome Tang, just a new roster every single year. Memphis has tried this so many different times. Typically, it's a big giant flop and a big giant waste of money, as well as we do have our good friend Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And then I know you also do the Ryan and Rush Show that's dedicated to West Virginia athletics. And what have you made out of West Virginia? Because I think they're doing exactly what we talked about. They're going to be maintaining a few guys from a season ago. Now, obviously, they're losing someone like a Hunter Uff, who it felt like had 500 years of eligibility, but that said, they replace him with Finley Bizjack coming over from Butler. Mohamed Sial is a former top 50 recruit from Georgia Tech. Javion Buchanan. I feel like these are just really nice pieces that fit that Russ Hodge system, and I feel like they've done a great job in the portal being able to find some guys, and at the same time, they've got a few returnees from a season ago as well.
Well, and I also think Greg Hodge got to go through the Big 12 gauntlet once now, so he got to see what he likes, what he needs, etc. So I'm with you. I have expectations. It's well documented. I'm an alum here. I live here. The guys are on staff or friends of mine, and same in the athletic department. I think they have a shot. I think they have a shot to really take a nice step here. But going through it once, I think really is beneficial for them, and just learning how the Big 12 operates and having a guy like Graham McCasland as his mentor, I think he knows exactly what he needs to get this program back to the dance next year.
Absolutely. And I feel like the entirety of the bottom of the Big 12 has had a rock solid offseason. But which conference would you say has perhaps been the biggest winners of the offseason? Because certainly the bottom of the Big 12 is up there, but I just continue to look at the Big East with what DePaul has done this offseason, with what Providence has done this offseason. Marquette finally signing a few guys. And I really like these moves that the Big East is making right now.
I agree with you on the Big East, and I think it's a trickle down. They have the money because they don't have to allocate all that money to the football programs like the SEC, Big Ten, doing that. Heck, even the Big 12 and the ACC. So I think just being basketball schools is beneficial to them.
I do think so as well. And what else I think has been really interesting here in the offseason, a lot of the big teams that you think would be spending have not done so thus far. For Kentucky, they bring in Alex Wilkins from Furman and Zoom Diallo from Washington. For Kansas, they bring in Leroy Blyden Jr. from Toledo and Keno Dawes from Utah. What have you made out of this? Because I recognize that with Kansas, they're looking to be able to build from within. I know that Bill Self isn't necessarily the biggest transfer portal stand in the world, but I would have expected these two teams to add a few more guys, especially with Kansas losing Flory Banunga here in the offseason.
Yeah, Kansas is an interesting experiment. I'm interested to see maybe a little bit more under the radar if that could be a better formula compared to what we saw the last couple of years with higher profile guys like Hunter Dickinson and Darren Peterson.
Yeah, it certainly is because with Kansas, they're looking to add more of those ancillary guys, and a few guys like Melvin Council last year was able to move for them, but we shall see what's going to be happening on that front as well. And then I was mentioning it, the bottom of the Big 12, a lot of those teams have really knocked my socks off with regards to what we've seen here in the offseason. I know that you were much like me. You love what Cincinnati did with bringing in Jared Calhoun. And how do you like some of the signings that they brought in? Because I do think that they're going to fit the Calhoun style. And it's a Cincinnati team that has very much went into the transfer portal here because they had almost no roster whatsoever from last season. That just happens with a new coach, but they do bring in a few of these, shall we say, ancillary guys from Utah State from the offseason. They bring in Miles Colvin, Riley Allen Patch, and I think that could be a little bit of a struggle. You're number one for Cincinnati, but I think that it's very clear that Jared Calhoun is looking to put a stamp on his program and have, shall we say, high energy and good all-around players.
I think we'll definitely see a jump with Cincinnati. Calhoun's won wherever he's been. The one thing I will say, Jared, is he's not going to compromise his culture in year one just for a couple extra wins. So he's in it for the long haul. He's in it to get Cincinnati back to where that program is used to being year in and year out in the NCAA tournament, advancing in the NCAA tournament. I think Cincinnati hit an absolute home run hire, bringing him back to the state of Ohio.
And I think that that's just so interesting that you bring that up as well, of him not necessarily trying to solve for wins this year, but just looking at things long term. And how much do you feel like there are some coaches that they get into the trap of having to try to impress in year number one, that it leads to just a downturn in year number two and year number three? Because like we saw with Dennis Gates after that great year one, he went winless in the SEC. We all know what happened with Jerome Tang. That, I think, is the most famous example of this. And how much do you think that it is important for a coach to obviously be adding good, solid players here in the transfer portal, but not sell out for year number one to really just cause things in year number two and beyond to be all sorts of herky-jerky and to not just sell out on their system?
Exactly, Greg. Do you want to win right away? Everybody wants to win. I mean, you get paid to win ball games, but I think Jerome Tang is the perfect guy, or the perfect example is, yeah, they won. They won big his first year, but they never could get that continuity and that culture down after that. And you see 3 straight losing seasons. He's out of a job before his 4th year is even over. So being able to balance it, I think that's why I'm so high on the Hodge hire at West Virginia. I think he's done a great job of balancing his culture this year and still winning games. I mean, yeah, they didn't make the NCAA tournament, but they win the crown. They win 20 games. Now they have a little bit of momentum going into year number 2. So I have similar expectations for Jared next year with Cincinnati.
Yep, totally agree with you. I thought that was a great hire for Cincinnati, but I don't think that that's the only great hire that we've seen out here in the Big 12 here in the offseason, because I had been calling for Arizona State to make a move for, I feel like, 5 off seasons. Apparently, they just love going to Dayton, and when they stop going to Dayton, they decide, oh, man, we don't have our travel plans for March anymore, so they decided to get Randy Bennett, and I like what Randy Bennett's done here in the portal, bringing in a lot of guys that he's familiar with. Nate Garcia was over at Cal Baptist, and his coach Rick Croy is now the associate associate coach over there, Joe Foxwell, Emmanuel Incente. They were over there in the WCC. How do you look at this? Because I know that Randy Bennett's a little bit of an older coach, but I really feel like he's doing it right now with Arizona State. Love the fact that he brought over Croy from Cal Baptist, and Arizona State is a team that was very stuck in their ways for a long time, but I feel like they've finally gotten it right.
Greg, this is maybe the single biggest upgrade coaching hire of the offseason. I mean, Randy Bennett has done way more with less for so long at St. Mary's. And what's great about Croy, not only is he a former head coach at Cal Baptist, but he worked for Randy Bennett at St. Mary's for 5 years already. It's not like there's going to be a learning curve or a transition. He already knows what Bennett wants. So bringing him over, now that he has head coaching experience, I love Arizona State. It's just another really good Big 12 coach in a really good league. I mean, we already talked about Bill Self. We got Kelvin Sampson, of course. You got Scott Drew, who has the national championship, TJ Otzelberger. You go down the list. Tommy Lloyd is the Final Four. So you had another really good head coach in a already really good league.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And Casey Alexander heading on over to Kansas State. I thought that was a solid hire as well. Probably going to take him a year or two to be able to get things going in the Little Apple himself, but I think that that's one that's going to be panning out as well. And then I'm going to keep this one a little bit more open-ended. Has there been a team or two here in the offseason that you've taken a look at and you feel like either people are overvaluing them a little bit and are giving them a little bit too much love, or is there a team or two that you feel like is flying under the radar and they deserve a little bit more love than what they're getting?
I'll go to Indiana. Yeah, it's great to spend all that money and get all those players, but I still am a little hesitant if it's going to work out. DeVries has kind of been more of an under-the-radar coach over his tenure in his career. Can he win now with all these expectations, especially with all the success on the football side? So Indiana has turned into maybe the most intriguing team coming out of the portal and into the new year just because of how much money they are investing in their program with the football success as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I do like the pickup of Marcus Burton, and I feel like they've brought in some good guys overall, but the question is it all going to be able to come together? Are they all going to be able to mesh? We see that so often in the transfer portal where you're bringing these guys that are all so solid individually, but they can't necessarily play together, looking at you, Loyola Chicago. So we shall see if that's going to be the case for them this year. And Ryan, I know that you're doing such an amazing job looking at this amazing sport of college basketball. You've got your finger on the pulse of it all throughout the year, but on top of that, doing a great job with college baseball, college football, and so much more. So I'd love to get people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Appreciate it, Greg. Always love chopping it up and talking ball. Yeah, go find me on the old Twitter X at Moneyline_Mac. Then the college experience every single night. We're going to be firing off some college football team previews here soon.
Absolutely, and that's when you know that we are getting everything good with regards to the sports calendar. Right now, we've got the NHL and the NBA playoffs. Once that subsides, we get some great summer baseball, and then once the temperature cools down, we get into college basketball, and hey, we're going to be in Rome to start the college basketball season. We found that out a few days ago as well, and Ryan, he does such an amazing job covering it all. So big thanks to Ryan for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming next, it's that time of the podcast where I recap the news and notes that we saw in college basketball on Monday. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be able to get Ryan McIntyre aboard. He does such amazing work looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. Did so once again today. So big thanks to Ryan for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. How about a man that went to Marquette University High School, now going to Marquette College? Marquette, with their second transfer of the offseason, Nolan Minsale. He was over at St. Thomas this last year. Not a lighted up three-point shooter, but a guy that doled out the ball for one of the more efficient offenses in all of college basketball at 6'5", 19.8 points, 4.5 rebounds, 4.3 assists per game. For good measure, he was able to throw in there a steal and apper contest as well. As a freshman, he actually also had a block per contest as well. He has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Marquette, and for Marquette, that is number 2 in terms of who they picked up in the transfer portal. They also bring in Senade Fru, who was over at Louisville this past season, and when he was at Louisville, he was a really nice, versatile big man, 9.6 rebounds per game. So we were talking about it with our good friend Ryan in the last segment. Marquette finally making some moves in the transfer portal. I like what they've got cooking here, so I thought that was very rock solid for them. You've got Donnie Freeman, who's going to be heading on over to St. John's, and for Donnie Freeman, he was dealing with a little bit of an injury last season, and he was just the main man for Syracuse this last year. 16.5 points, 7 boards, not an amazing three-point shooter at 30%, but St. John's never really has been about three-point shooting or anything like that. I think that this is a pretty nice pickup for Slick Rick Pitino. It's been a little bit of a slow offseason here for St. John's. Obviously, they're going to be needing to replace the likes of Zuby Ejiofor and a few other players from that roster this past season, but he is going to be the first real guy here in the portal that inks with St. John's. We'll see what else they have up their sleeve, but I do think that Slick Rick Pitino getting his hands on a guy that was a consensus former top 15 recruit, I think that this is a very, very good thing. So I absolutely love this move, and I think that this is going to be working out swimmingly for all involved. I think that this is a move that is going to be working out very swimmingly, as well as we did see a pair of guys head on over to Villanova. Daryl Buddy Simmons from St. Bonaventure and Elijah Crawford from UIC. Pair of guys that were at the mid-major level last season. For Elijah Crawford, really nice production and did begin his career over at BYU. 14 points, 4.9 assists per game. Not a guy that's going to light it up from three. You'll probably want him as a little bit more of a main facilitator, but was a part of a bunch that was playing some relatively solid defense, a team that was really good in terms of generating turnovers for this bunch this last season in Villanova. Not a team that was necessarily going to be forcing the issue, generating a whole bunch of turnovers, so I think that he's going to be able to help out with that regard. And for Daryl Simmons, he was the top scorer over at St. Bonaventure last season in that backcourt, 16.5 points per game, shot 42.5% from three, did some facilitating with about 3 assists per game, but being able to team those two guys up together, I think is going to be solid. They already bring in Jake Feigen, who is a nice go-to scorer over at Cornell. Devin Royal is going to be able to space the floor a little bit, so some good moves being made here by Villanova, so that's one that I do like. For Mohamed Diabate, he last season was playing at Kentucky, and LSU quite literally just got on the board with this. He is going to LSU. He was last season pretty solid over with the Wildcats. 8.8 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. For LSU, their roster right now is Mohamed Diabate, so they're going to need to add a little bit more, and he shot 21.5% from three-point range, so I have to think that there's some backcourt play coming, but hey, a good first signing here for LSU. We'll see what else they've got up their sleeve because, man, they're going to need to have a lot more up their sleeve. But that is a good starting place for them. We'll see what they're able to do here moving forward. I think that this is pretty solid as well. You have Tanner Davis. He last season was over at Utah Tech. He is going to be staying within the state. He is heading on over to Utah Valley. Utah Valley, they are losing quite a bit like Jackson Holcomb and company from a season ago. For Davis, 7.5 points, 3 boards, 6 for 5, a little bit of a combo player. Didn't necessarily shoot it amazing from three-point range, but he did a nice job on the defensive side of things for Utah Tech. He was generating about 1.7 steals per game as a true freshman, guy that is from the great state of Utah. So I think that this is going to be a nice, effective pickup for them, and I do think that he's going to be able to offer quite a bit of upside there. This is a guy that's actually returning to school. Patrick Ngangba, as we know, he was dealing with a little bit of ailment towards the NCAA tournament, towards the back half of the season, and I would have thought that he probably was going to be like a first-round pick, but as we know, even if you're a first-round pick, you might be able to make a little bit more in college rather than in the pros. For Ngangba, 10 points, 6 boards, popped a few threes, only shot about like 26% from three-point range, but was able to give you a block per game, one of the main focal points of one of the best defenses in all of college basketball. So for Duke, that is a big stinking deal, and we always highlight the transfers, always needs to be highlighted whenever you've got someone like that returning. And then this is a school that knows all about transfers because Eric Musselman, he always does a lot in the transfer portal. They're picking up Eric Rebe, who he just didn't see a lot of minutes this past year over at UConn. He was sort of in the shadow of Alex Caravan, Terrace Reed, a former top 50 recruit that when he was out there, he was relatively effective. 6 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. A guy that perhaps can be able to pop a few threes at 7'1", not really a main portion of his game quite yet, but him going on over to USC, I think that really helps out the Trojans. As for USC, they've had a few signings thus far. It's not like they've been signing guys as frequently as they have in past off seasons. The only other real guy that they brought in, KJ Lewis, nice double figure scorer over at Georgetown, but still, I think that this is a good signing for them. I do think that he's going to be able to help out a USC team that they just weren't good down low. I don't understand why Gabe Dines wasn't seeing more minutes for them this past season, so hopefully he gets utilized a little bit more than what we saw from Dines a season ago, but it's very clear that this team is going to be looking to add a little bit more down low, and how about the Citadel going out there and signing guys? Like, this one was completely unbeknownst to me. They already brought in Eddie Bronson along Joe Hulbert. I didn't know that the Citadel had any sort of NIL whatsoever, but they're bringing in Ramel Bethea, who was over at UW Green Bay this last season at 6'9". It's not like he was a rambunctious scorer, 3.5 points, 2.5 rebounds per game, but probably better than a lot of the guys that they had on the roster this last season. So they had a little bit of size there. And then Chase Cormier, he was playing over at Iona this last season. For Cormier, he was really unable to get out there on the floor. When he was at Wofford a few seasons ago, that's when things were really at their peak. During the 2023-24 season, guy shot 50% from three, was attempting 3.5 threes per game, and it was over the course of 30 games. So actually a nice sample size, 7 points per game. The Citadel has had really, really bad low post play, really, really bad guard play. They just have needed anything whatsoever. This helps them out big time. So absolutely love that. For UT Rio Grande Valley, they've had a lot of losses here in the offseason. They lose their coach. They lose so much of their roster. But that said, they've got a few guys that are going to be coming in. Jeffrey Martinez, who was over at USC Upstate, along Tajon Brown, which that's quite the name. He comes on over from McNeese. And for Brown, not a guy that necessarily saw a bunch of minutes this last season over at McNeese. But still, I do think that he's going to be able to help this team out a little bit, as he 2 seasons ago, 2024-2025 campaign over at McNeese, was averaging about 4.5 points, nearly 2 assists, shot 35% from three-point range, native of the state of Texas, a little bit undersized at 5'11", took a redshirt year this last season, but I think that that's going to be a good starting spot for them. And then with Martinez, they're going to be able to build their low post around him. Guy that was able to average about 4.5 points, 5 rebounds per game, shot over 65% from the floor, 1.7 blocks per game. Not going to be rambunctious on the offensive side of things, but now you found yourself a little bit of a facilitator. You found yourself a guy that you're able to build around a little bit more down low. Very well done there. So that's a good starting spot for them. We'll see what else they're going to be able to have moving forward. But so far, they're getting on the board and they're doing a good job in terms of trying to revamp things. Took them a few weeks, but good to be able to see that. And then for South Carolina, they get on the board with another transfer. They've been solid here thus far. They pick up Corey Mincy, Cameron Heide, pair of guys are going to be able to help out in the backcourt. Alexis Bukasis, he comes over from Wisconsin, a little bit of versatility there. Now they pick up Shane Blakeney, who was a part of Drexel team that was very slow, very controlled, so he was going to fit the South Carolina system very well, and he was the main guy for Drexel this last year. 14 points, 5 boards, 2.5 assists, shot 36% from 3, was able to generate a steal per contest as well, free throw shooting and leaving a little bit of something to be desired. But for South Carolina, I feel like they've done a relatively solid job here in the offseason. Now, it is a case where they're going to need to add quite a bit more, and the work is still not done, but that said, this is a good starting spot for them, and it does appear as though things are going to be a little bit more promising there. This one's off the wall because you no longer have to evaluate Michael O.C. Benusu. He entered in the transfer portal, but at 6'4", 289 pounds, he's now going to be playing football. He was actually one of the main rebounders for Missouri State this last year, a guy that was able to average 10 plus points per game over the last 2 seasons, so that's interesting. And then I think that this is also something that you want to be taking note of as well. While UConn had a really nice weekend this past weekend in terms of being able to get some guys back, they've had some nice signings here in the transfer portal. Appears as though Solo Ball will be undergoing wrist surgery and miss the entire 2026-27 season. That's not great, to say the least, for UConn. Have to imagine that this is going to make them a little bit more, shall we say, wanting to sign guys in the transfer portal. I think that they are going to be really cranking things up here in the next few weeks, so that's very much something to note, because for UConn, they've already had themselves a relatively nice offseason. You figure that Solo Ball might be a little bit banged up for this upcoming season. Probably didn't have that on your bingo card, so we will see what is going to be happening on that front. And on this front, you've got yourself Alabama getting on the board with more size. It's very clear what they're doing here in the offseason. Cole Kohler, who comes over from NC State, Brandon Garrison, Jabarian Davis Fleming, their previous 3 signings. All these guys are either power forwards or centers, so they are really looking to beef up there, and now they bring in Drew Fielder. He was over at Boise State this last season, and hey, they've gotten to the mountainous part of the country, and they've had some success in the past. We'll see if they're going to be able to do so once again. For Fielder, 14.7 points, 5.5 boards, shot 40% from 3-point range at 6'10", so he certainly has the versatility to be able to fit in this Alabama system. He is a part of a Boise State team that was one of the best on the defensive glass last season as well, so this is a really nice pickup for them. I love what they're bringing to the table here, and that's really nice for them. And now for Auburn, they're getting on the board with a few transfers. They've done a nice job in terms of protecting some of their own with Taj Pettiford and company, but Bucky Oboye is coming over from Santa Clara, Owen Freeman from Creighton, and then Thomas Dowd, he was over at Troy. For Dowd, he had the best season last year, but he was playing at the small school, 14.4 points, 10 rebounds per game, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range. He's a native of the great state of Alabama, so I do think that he's going to be able to do a nice job in terms of helping this team out, and I do think that this is going to be a relatively solid fit for them, and then you've got yourself a guy in Freeman that was just really riddled with injury this year and towards the back half of the 2024-25 season when he was in peak form at Iowa. This was a guy that was able to be a really nice rim protector and solid in the 19 games that he played during the 2024-25 season. 1.8 blocks, 16.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. Now, Iowa was not necessarily the world's greatest defensive team back in the Fran McCaffrey days when he was there, but hey, you know what? He's going to be able to help out an Auburn team that, let's call it what it is, they were just really bad on the defensive side of things last season, so we will see what they're going to be able to do moving forward. And then in terms of Bucky Oboye, he last season was over at Santa Clara, and he was able to do a nice job in terms of being an interesting mixer and shaker for them. About 8 points, 4 boards. He's a little bit more of a project guy at 7'1", was able to give the team a little bit over a block per contest. I have to imagine that's a little bit more of a depth piece rather than anything else. If he's seeing massive minutes, that's probably not a place where the team wants to be, just calling it what it is. But still, they pick up some nice pieces. You've got Pettiford in the backcourt, so they've got a nice strong nucleus. We'll see if they're going to be able to add to that here more towards the process and here in the offseason. For Iona, they get another add, and they've had themselves a nice offseason. Sadiku Abine Ayo comes over from St. John's after not seeing a lot of minutes there, but Kashawn Mitchell was really good over at Bryant 2 seasons ago as a 6'11", do-it-all sort of player. Martin Keel, he comes over from Idaho State. He's going to be able to give the team a little bit of pop from three-point range, and now they bring in Kevin Vanderhorst. He should be able to help out the team a little bit more in terms of the defensive aspect of things. Only shot about 26.5% from three, but part of a Drexel team that was really nice, slow, controlled, doled out 3 assists, gave the team 9.5 points per game. Now, Drexel did have their turnover issues, so that's something that you very much want to be mindful of, but still, I do think that this is a good pickup for them, and for Iona, it feels like they're really checking a bunch of different boxes. It's going to make them very versatile for this upcoming season. They're going to be able to give teams lots of different looks, so I like what they're doing there, and I felt like that was solid. And for Jacksonville State, they're taking swings on a pair of guys that didn't see a lot of minutes at the Power Conference level, and Leon Horner from Texas Tech and Cash Pollock from Arizona State. Now they get a little bit more of a proven scorer. Jordan Stemke, he last season was over at Loyola Maryland, and he was one of their main guys. 10 points, assists and a half per contest, shot 33.5% from three-point range this past season at about 6'5". I think that he's going to do a nice job fitting this Jacksonville State system. It was a Loyola Maryland team that was playing a little bit more slowly. Not necessarily like super duper slow, but still a team that was certainly not looking to run it and gun it or anything like that. So I do think that this is going to be a solid pickup for them, and I do think that that's a nice system add for them. And then how about LaSalle getting on the board with another transfer? They've done a good job here in the offseason. Just about 24 hours ago, added in their Cam Burton from Stephen F. Austin, Anthony Finkley from St. Joe's. Now they bring in Devin Booker, who was over at George Mason, and it's not like Booker was seeing a lot of minutes. And no, this is not the former Kentucky Booker, but still a guy that is 6'4", has just roots to the Philadelphia area in general, had a little bit of fanfare coming out of high school, just wasn't able to see a lot of minutes. I think that he's going to be able to come in there, help them out right away, so I thought that that was solid for them. For Lamar, they're looking to turn over a new leaf with the coaching change here in the offseason, and now they're going to have a little bit more down low with Matthew Reed coming on over from Iona. Didn't see a lot of minutes last year at Iona. His best year came during his, shall we say, freshman season over at Tulsa. During the 2023-24 campaign, saw a few stars, 4.5 points, 4 boards out there in the Americans. A guy that at 6'9" is proven that he's solid down low. He's able to pop a few threes, but only shot about 28% from three. That is certainly not the forte of his, but still a guy that should be able to give you a little bit of production with regards to playing an inside-out game. So I do like what they're doing there. And for Louisiana, it was a very disappointing year for them this past season. Now they are on the attack, and they are signing some guys. Trent Middleton Jr. is coming over from North Carolina A&T, Danny Pounds from Tennessee Tech, and Makai Cooper from Lindenwood. They ink all three of these guys. As for Middleton, last season, he was able to be a solid player for North Carolina A&T. 12.5 points, 3 assists, shot only about 31% from three. Previous year over at Delaware, he was giving that team about 5.5 points per game. Career about 33% three-point shooter, so he's been a little bit hit or miss with that regard, but should help out a Louisiana team that was one of the lesser offensive teams in all of college basketball. And then for Cooper, he was over with Lindenwood this last season, began his career over at Miami of Ohio, 4 assists, 6.5 points per game. Again, not necessarily an amazing three-point shooter, but a guy that's going to be able to help you have a little bit more facilitation than they had a season ago and a bit more depth in general. And then for Danny Pounds at Tennessee Tech, he was able to supply that team with 10.5 points, 5 boards at 6'7", actually shot 35.5% from 3, was more of a defensive stopper and a rebounder when he was over at Old Dominion a few seasons ago, was trying to get out there for Hampton as well. I think that was a case where he just was injured, what have you, and I believe that he's got a brother as well that he used to play over at Hampton, but was able to take some nice strides forward this past season over at Tennessee Tech. So love what these guys are doing. And for Louisiana Monroe, the UAB connection continues. They've already brought in Karan McPherson, Jawan Anderson. Now they're bringing in Lance Carr to be able to drive things. For Carr, again, not a guy that saw like a whole bunch of minutes or anything like that, but I mean, the connection is going to be there. It's very clear that hiring on a UAB assistant is making Louisiana Monroe think, hey, now we can bring in all these guys. They're going to know the system right away, and that's the power of being able to have a coach from a different program that is able to recruit really, really well and has been able to do so thus far. For Maine, they're on the board with a transfer as well. DeAndre 3000 Williams. He last season was playing over at Holy Cross, and he was solid for Holy Cross. I'm not going to call him amazing, but still, he was able to put up for the team about 8 points. He shot about 31.5% from three-point range, a guy that was one of the better defenders for the team 2 seasons ago. He was able to give the team a steal per game. I think that he's going to be a nice fit for a Maine team that the offense has not been good for them, to say the least. Like, man, they were absolutely brutal with that regard, but I think that there is going to be some upside here. I do think that he's going to be able to come in there, be a very effective player for a Maine team that they've always been a really good defensive team under this Mark Wood regime. They just have really been lacking in terms of scoring. I think that he's going to be able to help out just a little bit with regards to scoring. So I do think that that's a relatively solid add for them. For North Dakota State, they get on the board with another transfer. They're bringing in Jack Robinson, who was just not able to see minutes over at Wisconsin this last season, but now they bring in Josiah Harper. He was a 6'7", a little bit of a combo player that was over at Maryland. He redshirted, wasn't necessarily like a top 150 recruit or anything like that, but for North Dakota State, they've done a great job with their style. Last few seasons, they've been a really good three-point shooting team. They've relied upon versatility like they should be able to get here, and I think that this is going to be a move that just really fits the system and helps this team be able to elevate in general. And then for Andrew Crawford, he's going to be looking to elevate over at Northern Colorado. Northern Colorado has had great success being able to bring in guys from the state of Colorado. He's a former top 100 recruit, just really didn't see a lot of minutes this last season at 6'6". When he was in high school, he was really bombing it from three-point range. Defenses probably leave something to be desired because that's the only way that you'd be able to do it if you're Northern Colorado. But still, I think that this is a great ad, and it just really fits with what has worked for them in the past. Jack Daughtry, he was over at Illinois State this last season, saw a little bit of a dip in his production. 2 years ago, he was averaging 6.5 points, shot 47% from three-point range, albeit on a small sample size, but I knew he was rock solid there at about 6'8". This past season, shot 24% from three-point range at 3 points per game, and Northern Illinois is gambling that he's able to find that form from 2 seasons ago, and I do think that's a good gamble for Northern Illinois. It's been really, really rough for them the last few seasons, and has been a team that's been struggling on offense. They really, really struggled on defense, and he was a part of a Illinois State team that was really good on the defensive end this last season as well, so he should be able to bring a little bit of toughness and tenacity on that front as well. So I do think that this is a good pickup for them. He stays within the state, so this makes all the sense in the world. Pepperdine just continuing to add guys left and right. Now they bring in Jahari Williamson. Like, they've already got 2 big men coming in. Peter Mistrovich, he was really solid over at Long Beach State. He was averaging about 11.5 points per game, began his career at Syracuse. Evan Hayward, he was actually a solid player over at Butler this last season. Will McClendon, cut short by injury at North Texas, but keep in mind 2 years ago at Old St. Josie State, he was doing a nice job. Now they add in there a guy that I like in Jahari Williamson. He last season over at Kent State, 10.5 points, shot 44.5% from three-point range. I don't know where this money is coming for Pepperdine, but hey, Pepperdine is spending. Like, this is really good because the WCC is obviously going to be way down. No longer do you have the Gonzaga Bulldogs out there, but hey, they're going to be trying to be able to rise up the standings. Pepperdine has been down for very, very long, and I mean, with Pepperdine, you get to recruit to, I think that they're in Malibu. It might be some other really nice California beach or something like that, but you're recruiting to a really, really nice place in general, so I have no idea why they haven't had more success than what they have, but hey, now they're doling out the money. They've got people that want to be enjoying life out there on the beach. This is a man at Williamson that is from the country of Canada, so I'm sure they could use the warm weather. So I do like that move for them. And then you've got Evangelos Zugris. Hopefully I got that correct. And he has decided that he is going to be transferring on over from Louisville on over to St. Mary's. For St. Mary's, it's going to be a big giant change without having Randy Bennett in the fold, but Mickey McConnell, it looks like he's trying to stay true to his style of bringing in international imports. For last year for Zugris, 2.5 points, 2 rebounds per game at 6'8". Not a guy that's going to go out there, pop it from three, but a big man that's going to be all up, out, down low. They're bringing in Luke Fennell as well from Syracuse, a little bit of a 6'6", do-it-all sort of player. So they're staying true to those roots. I really like that, even though the program is no longer having Mr. Bennett out there. I do think that this is going to be solid for them, so I like that move as well. For Seton Hall, they added a few guys. They've already got Simeon Wilcher on the books, comes over from Texas along with St. John's. Now they're bringing in Roddy Anderson III from Xavier, along with Del Jones. Jones has familiarity with the power conference level. He began his career over at Clemson, really didn't see a lot of playing time there, but this past season at Radford, he put in there 17 points, 3.5 assists per game, and he was shooting only about 31% for three, but could be a nice facilitator. We'll say that Radford had a tough time in terms of taking care of the ball, so there's that aspect of things. Radford wasn't necessarily the greatest defensive team, but as we know, Clemson, who we played for 2 seasons ago, always a really, really rock-solid defensive team, so we're going to see what he's going to be able to do there. And then for Roddy Anderson, this past season when he was over at Xavier, he was able to supply that team with about 11 points per game. Never been an amazing three-point shooter, and Seton Hall would love to see them add a little bit more three-point shooting. Wilcher should be able to take off a little bit more, give this team a little bit more from the outside than what they've had in the past, but you still have some question marks there. They are going to need to address that a little bit, but it's very clear that Shaheen Holloway, he's recruiting a specific sort of guy. He really wants to be defense-oriented once again, have great versatility, active hands. This is certainly going to be able to check that box, so they are staying true to themselves, and they're bringing in guys that they feel are going to be able to fit the system, and hopefully this podcast is fitting what you're looking to do, as well as we've got Corey Cotton, who is going to be heading on over to DePaul, so another nice ad for the Big East and DePaul in general. I mean, being able to add Magoon Gwath, Kamari Holmes, a 19-point per game scorer over at Wofford, Wilson Jaquez, who is averaging 8+ rebounds per game over at Fresno State, Adi Pupla, he was really good over at Tulsa. It might be Popla. I do hope it's Pupla because that's hilarious, but still, now you add in there Corey Cotton, who last year over at UT Rio Grande Valley was a 40% three-point shooter, 14 points, 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists, was a part of Jacksonville State team that was always really good on the defensive side of things as well. Should be able to stuff the stat sheet for this team. Absolutely love this move. DePaul is hitting it out of the park here in the offseason, so that's another nice, impactful ad for them. And hey, Dayton, they just continue to get up on the board. Zayd Lowry is coming over from Marquette. Jalen Haynes, who missed off last year from Cincinnati. Few out of sight, out of mind guys. Now they're going to be bringing in Grant Randall, who had himself a nice year this last year over at Quinnipiac. 11.5 points, 6.5 boards. Probably going to be a little bit more of a depth piece at 6'9". He popped it a little bit from three at about 32.5% from three. Dayton might not necessarily be the most menacing team down low, but they are going to have that great guard play once again. I like what they're doing here, so that's a good pickup for them. And then Caden Edwards, he was over at TCU this last season. He has decided that he is going to be going on over to Creighton, and it's very clear that Alan Huss is going to be looking to recreate what he had over at High Point for Edwards. Didn't see a lot of playing time this last year, 3.5 points per game, but did shoot 43.5% from three-point range. He should be able to do a nice job in terms of fitting with that system. I think that that's a really good ad for them. And then, hey, Coastal Carolina, they're up on the board themselves. Trey Perry, he was over at Miami of Ohio last season. Certainly not one of the biggest guys from Miami of Ohio, but still, 5.5 points per game, shot 38.5% from three-point range. Coastal Carolina has been shaky with regards to their three-point shooting over the last few seasons, but have been pretty good on the defensive side of things. They don't generate any turnovers whatsoever. He should be able to help out on that front a little bit more as well. Good pickup for them. I do like what they're doing here in the offseason, and I do like the fact that Buffalo had this pickup as well. Mikel Tine, he was over at Richmond this last season. He was a guy that I expected maybe a little bit more from, but still, 6.5 points per game, shot 39% from three-point range. He's very much going to fit with a Buffalo system that defense left something to be desired last year, but offensively, this was a team that was able to do a nice job filling it up. They were a really good three-point shooting team. They do lose so many of their guys like Daniel Freitag and company from a season ago. Tine is going to do a nice job in terms of filling that void, and then you've got Onyx Nana, hopefully I got that correct. He was over at South Florida, redshirt guy this last season. He heads on over to Bryant too. They also picked up Andre Pasha, double-figure scorer from New Haven this last season. Both of these guys are 6'9". Bryant was just getting absolutely bulldozed on the glass this last season. They're going to need to pick up some guard play because they were also a little bit lax days ago with regards to guard play. But hey, they're making some moves. You do like to be able to see that, and I feel like they've been able to get on the board in regards to most of these low majors in a good way thus far. So we'll see what else they have. Josh Ibakonla, hopefully I got that correct. That is a mouthful. He was over at High Point this last season at 6'10", 3 points, 2 boards. Not a guy that's going to stretch the floor, pop it from 3, but still should be able to help out a Bradley team that's been a little bit hit or miss with regards to their low post play this last season. He comes over and they brought in Trayvon Payton, who was a really good 3-point shooter over Arkansas Pine Bluff. Bradley the last few seasons has been one of the better 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. So I like that sort of big and small combination that they've got going on right now, and it's clear that Ball State, they are not done spending as well. They bring in Javion Kai King from Central Arkansas, Aaron Fine, the walk-on from Purdue, Kajel Parker, 40% 3-point shooter over at UMass, and now, boy, they really just gave me the really hard names to say here on this Monday. Babatunde Dordala, who he last season over at Temple was able to give you about 5 points per game. Not a guy that's going to pop it and lock it from 3. At 6'8", he was able to be an okay, shall we say, low post player. Was able to give you about 1.5 assists per game. A little bit unknown as to what he's going to be able to bring this team, but for Ball State, they were absolutely terrible down low. They had some good active hands. They were able to generate a few turnovers, but they really lacked down low. He should be able to help out with that front end. Hopefully, I'm helping you get set for what is going to be an amazing college basketball season for this upcoming season. We've got 100 billion guys in the transfer portal. We've got lots to sort out, and it's my job to help you guys sort it out. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Big thanks to our guy Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, for joining me in the last segment, coming at you guys every single day on this podcast during the offseason, looking at the news and notes of college basketball once we get back in season fix and analysis on every single game, every single day. So appreciate you tuning in today. I'll be back with you Wednesday tomorrow. Thank you.